Word on Wednesday. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tait. Welcome to our teaching series. Welcome to Word on Wednesday at the Village. Look, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Do me a favor, if you're getting on, would you invite some people to join you tonight? You have to send them an invitation. There's no longer watch parties on Facebook, but you can send people invitations. And so take the opportunity now to do that. Send some folks some invitations. You go down to the bottom of your screen where it says send, and you can invite folks to join us and to be a part of our study tonight. So I want you to take an opportunity to do that, and so you can sort of be in the study with us tonight. And I pray that you've had a good day. Also, I want you to, when you see us on YouTube, to subscribe to the Village page, so you will be the first to know when we are online, when we are doing anything. You'll be the first person to get information. So take the opportunity to do that, and particularly today or at some point when you see us popping up on YouTube Live, subscribe to our channel so you can be the first person to know. You can be the first to know that we are on and we are popping. All right, so take the opportunity. You can communicate with me if you have questions. You can put them on the comment section. But what I want you to do now is just take the opportunity to invite some other people to join us tonight. And that will be a very important step for you to take. And so we can get rolling here. And so it's good to have you. We're going through the book of Esther, and it's a very powerful book, and it really is very insightful. So I want to give you a few more minutes for people to sort of jump on, to get ready, get a pencil or something. Maybe you have an iPad you write on, or just some tablet. You have a Bible, it could be electronic, or a Bible that you hold in your hands. Some people are textile; they have to hold it, they have to feel the pages. So whatever way you like to study, and also ask you to be present. So if you have some water, or if you have some tea, perhaps you may be eating a little dinner because it's 7:34. Good to see you, Miss Perry. Good to see you. So invite some people to come on and let them know that we are on now. Thank you, Miss Perry. And so invite some people to join. And matter of fact, you could have some neighbors or friends who don't have access to internet. It'd be a good opportunity for them to invite them to your house, to your apartment, wherever you live. On Wednesdays at 7:30, have a little Bible study with them. Have them over, opportunity to fellowship and to ask questions. You can always put your questions in the comment section at the bottom of the page, and let us know. Sometimes we're able to get to questions, sometimes we're not. But for whatever, we'll try to get to them. And so we want you to participate, be a part of what we're doing, and want you to know that we do really care about you. And also, before we get started, we do want to continue to pray for the Floyd family. Even though the verdict was a verdict that all of us were happy that happened. It was a just verdict, and it wasn't. Sometimes people think that there was some extraordinarily thing that was done. They did the right thing. Justice was finally served. So we're very happy for that. But there's so much that's going on in in our country. On that same day, we know that there was a young lady who was killed in Ohio. She's 14 years old. She was shot down by the police. Her name was Makia Bryant. I don't know all the circumstances, but I do know there's something wrong when armed, particularly white men, can kill 9 or 10 people, mass murder people, and walk out unscathed. with a gun, and they end up living. And a 14-year-old girl, maybe she's 14 or 15. I don't know what the circumstances. I think it was some kind of ruckus or something. But why do you go in with a gun for a 14-year-old and shoot her 4 times in the chest? So that was happening at the same time that the verdict was reading for a former police officer Chauvin, who committed murder, who killed Floyd. And so we definitely, your emotions go one way, and up one way in terms of being excited about the fact that justice was finally rendered for an African American in one of these cases. And it's very rare that a police officer is ever convicted of murder, particularly of a black person, but hardly ever. And I think this was only the 7th conviction of an officer in I don't know how many years. So we just want to pray for these families, pray for our country, pray that, and not only pray, but be involved in bringing about the changes that we want to see, and particularly in our country. All right, so let's get started tonight. We're in the book of Esther, um, and we are in chapter number 3. And tonight we'll be primarily looking at verses 12 through 15. But I'll give you a brief refresher on the beginning of the chapter that sort of starts at verse 1 and goes down to verse 11. So if you have that, I ask that you would, get your Bible out and you take notes. I'm reading tonight, though, from the Good News translation of the Bible, which is interpreted from the Masoretic text. Masoretic text is a text that basically has been translated from the Hebrew by Jewish scholars and others. And then this English version is translated from that particular text. And so Good News version is a pretty reliable translation. There are others, and I will use all of them. And so sometimes get familiar with them. And so tonight, we want to just look back briefly at the story and then kind of bring up and look at these verses 12 through 15. But as we know, Haman, he has been promoted by King Xerxes, who's also called King Ahasuerus. Yes, a lot of times there are 2 names that people have, sometimes 3, like Esther has another name, Hadassah. And so sometimes we have 2 names, and if you're reading these stories and reading these biblical texts, you have to keep up, or sometimes remember, because you may be reading about the same person with a different name. So King Xerxes, we'll use that. He promoted Haman as a prime minister. We don't know exactly, how Haman just showed up, but he appears, and a lot of times that's what a writer does. He appears in the text. And some suggest that maybe this book is written by Esther herself, but that's always debated. And so, but the author, whoever the author was, if it was Esther or someone else, decided to insert Haman into this text, and he becomes the prime minister. And of course, he's a descendant of Hagag, and Hagag is an Amalekite from the tribe, the Amalekites. And the Amalekites, of course, are enemies of the Jewish people. And of course, Mordecai is a Jew. Esther is also a Jew. And Esther she's hiding, and she's not revealing, who she is. So she's passing as a Persian woman. She is now the queen and the wife of King Xerxes. And so the king ordered sort of all the officials to show Haman respect by just bowing down. This had nothing to do with idol worship. It had nothing to do with Mordecai breaking any kind of the Jewish laws or anything like that. It was out of respect, because he's the prime minister, and so out of respect, you would kneel down, you would bow in his presence. It's a respect thing. And so Mordecai decided that he wasn't going to do it. He actually refused to do it, and because you can imagine all the other officials, because this happened over a period of time, probably several months, that he was refusing to show Haman any kind of respect. Now Haman found out about it, and he was very upset um, about it. But before that, these other officials asked Mordecai, "Why aren't you bowing down?" So Haman sort of, his explanation was, "I'm a Jew," he explained, "and I cannot bow to Haman." So that's very interesting. He sort of interjects himself, and he sort of outs himself and says that I'm a Jew. And it's really interesting, because Jews were really marginalized people. They were in the empire, sort of under duress. And so it's very interesting that he sort of like, lets know that I can't do it because I'm a Jew. And basically, he was saying is, this is, he really gave it, besides saying I'm a Jew, that's no real reason. It's just, perhaps he was just saying, this is my enemy. I know he's my enemy of my people. We don't read that Haman had done anything to Mordecai personally, but he talks about, I'm a Jew, and I cannot bow down. So Haman, um, I heard about this, and then they were wondering, the other officials wondering how long this kind of behavior was going to be tolerated. So of course you can imagine, Haman was furious, and the text says, and for Mordecai not kneeling and bowing to him. And then when he learned that he was a Jew, he decided to do more than punish Mordecai. He decided that he was going to kill every Jew in the whole Persian Empire. And this is a really overstep. It's like one person does something to you, or let's say an individual, and their reaction is to get everybody that's connected to them. It almost, you think about mafia, you think about gangs, you think about people who threaten other people. And so, because of one individual, Mordecai, who decided that he wasn't going to show him respect, Haman, sort of this real huge overreach, decides, I'm going to really exterminate um, all of the Jews in the empire, right? And so we know the exterminate means that you are not only, killing men who normally, and most of the times, will go to war. Now, of course, armies have been integrated, and also women in history. There have been women warriors too, but in a lot of ways, there was this sort of a code of ethics that, a lot of times women wouldn't be killed. Sometimes other things would be done that they wouldn't be killed, especially children. But in this case, he wanted to exterminate. He wanted to get rid of all the Jews. So that means the children as well as the women and the men. And this is harsh, because we look at this as a biblical text, and we also think that this is something sort of ancient, or it doesn't happen. But as I told you on last week, there's a biopic. It's a 4-part series. It's on, I think, Amazon Prime. You may be able to stream it. It's called Exterminate All the Brutes. It's by Royal Peck. He is the director of it, and sort of produced this. And it's a really good biopic history piece that tells a story about how particularly Europeans have gone throughout the world to get rid of any persons that were non-European. So it goes all the way back even to the Christian Crusades and all of that. And so these kind of things have been happening for a long time. So anyway, he wanted to kill them all. And so he decided that, I'm going to pick a month and pick a day to do this. And so they were going to cast lots in order to do that, almost like shooting dice and determine the day and the date. And casting lots is a term called Purim, Purim. And also, even today, Jewish people, they celebrate it as a time of celebration, because they remember their time in the Persian Empire. And they also, this is a celebration, you can look it up, where they wear masquerades. They wear, they cover their faces, and they, because this whole thing about hiding in terms of what Esther was doing, and also Mordecai to this point. And so, what Mordecai does in verse 8 of chapter 3 is he says that he explains to the king, there's a certain race of people scattered all over your empire, found in every province. They observe customs that are not like those of any other people. Moreover, they do not obey the laws of the empire. So it's not in your best interest to tolerate them. And that's a key verse, verse 8. I want you to look at that. There's a certain race of people scattered all over your empire, found in every province. They observe customs that are not like those of other people. Moreover, they do not obey the laws of the empire. So it is not in your best interest to tolerate them. Now listen to this. So this is Haman telling the king about these Jewish people. And just because someone is telling another individual, whether they're high ranking or low ranking, doesn't mean what they're saying is true. Some of the issues that we have in this country is that when we listen to people on the radio, or now even on social media, or there's something that's in the printed form, or it could be in a book, or it could just be in a newspaper, the assumption is that it must be true because it's there. But a lot of times it's not true, or if it's true, there are parts that are missing. Because when a writer or a reporter reports something or talks about something, they tell it from a certain perspective. It doesn't mean that their perspective is necessarily wrong, but a lot of times their perspective causes them to be blind about other perspectives or other angles in which they could see the story. For instance, we know that the rendering of the guilty verdict on all three counts of former officer Chauvin because of the murder of George Floyd, you had some, particularly on certain news channels, who said the only reason why there was a guilty verdict is because the jury was afraid. Now, that is absolutely, I don't think it's true, but what it does is it really it doesn't allow for what all of us saw on with our eyes what happens. And what it also does when someone plants those kind of seeds of a dissension by saying something like that, it makes you wonder about the verdict. Like, was he really guilty? When you saw what happened to him, it wasn't like somebody had to explain it. We all saw it. It was brutal. He was murdered in front of our eyes. The whole world saw it. But when someone says, the only reason why that the jury voted this way to convict him is because they were afraid. See, they were afraid, and that's just that's a kind of storytelling that doesn't get to that sort of plants these seeds that we all want to get rid of, that somehow that black folks are not worthy of justice. And it sounds almost believable, almost you can sort of go along with the story. But do you say those same kind of things when officers are getting off, or they and they shouldn't be getting off? I mean, what is your storyline for that one? And so these are the kind of things that some people, they like to slant these stories because they don't like the outcome, because they still, particularly in the case of George Floyd and black people in particular, they don't see us as human. And anytime there is a situation where we are in the crosshairs of law and law enforcement and so-called justice, then we can't be right. And these same persons will take this little guy, I can't even think of his name now, which is probably good, who shot two people during during a peaceful protest when they were leaving. And he's a teenager, and they make him out to be a hero. And my thing is, how can you be a hero when you murder an individual and maim the other one, and you go home at night, you walk through the crowd, and you don't even get arrested? But that's how sometimes the story is spun. So Verse 8, he said, there's a certain race of people scattered all over the empire, found in every province. They observe customs that are not like those of other people. Now, my thing is, when you have different people living within the regions, we all have different customs. We all have different traditions. We have different cultures. That doesn't mean that we are against each other. There's some, even in your own family, um, there could be different sort of experiences or certain traditions that you have that other family members, let's say if you have family members that live in the South and you live in the North, you could have certain things that are different. So, but he spends this story and then he says, listen, if it please your majesty, issue a decree that they are put to death. Um, and if you do, I guarantee I will be able to put 375 tons of silver, approximately 187 million US dollars, into the royal treasury for the administration of the empire. So the king took off his ring, which was used to stamp proclamations and make them official, and he gave it to the enemy of the Jewish people, Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the descendant of Haggai. The king told him, the people and their money are yours. Do as you like with them. Very interesting. Now, I want us to skip down to chapter 3, verses sort of 12 through 15. And I want to sort of skip through and just show you the kind of sort of mind that Haman had. And sometimes we can juxtapose that with some of the thinking that we've had, even in our modern times. So it says, verse number 12 of chapter 3, so on the 13th day of the first month, Haman called the king's secretaries, all right, and dictated a proclamation to be translated into every language and system of writing used in the empire, to be sent to all the rulers and governors and officials. It was issued in the name of King Xerxes and stamped with this ring. And listen to this. So the king is not even the king is not even putting together this proclamation. It is being dictated by Haman to the king's secretaries. This is an interesting thing. It's almost like the king he's abdicating his responsibility. He's turned it over to his prime minister, and he is dictating a proclamation. It's going to be in every language and every system of writing used in the empire, and it's sent to all the rulers and governors and officials. And then he says it was issued in the name of King Xerxes and stamped with this ring, which meant that it has this approval. And sometimes this is how leadership functions, that someone else is writing up all of the policies and the laws, but when it comes out, their name is on it. And so they are in agreement to what's being written. So think about it for a moment. In our context, when a law is made into law and it gets, particularly in the federal government, it gets on the president's desk. Once he signs it's done. It's a done deal. But before it gets to him, there are a lot of people that put these things together and work them out. And sometimes we wonder, at least I do, how much of it does this president or any president that we've had or knows what they're signing, whether it's even a governor signing things that are detrimental to people's lives, that can be harmful. And so this is interesting. And then he says the runners took the proclamation to every province. So this thing is going everywhere. It's going all over the place. And it really is a proclamation to exterminate all of the Jews. I mean, it's get rid of them, all of them. The runners, they said, it took the proclamation to every province and empire. It contained the instructions that on a single day, the 13th day of Adar or Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed. All right. They were to be slaughtered without mercy, and their belongings were to be taken. All right. And so this is modern day times. We'd be thinking about around the 1940s, World War One, World War Two, particularly in Nazi Germany, and the Holocaust, and when all of that was happening. If we're going to look at it from an African American perspective, we're looking at the Great Ma'afa in terms of the Middle Passage, bringing our African ancestors over to the Americas, not just to what we call North America or the United States, but to the Americas. That means North America, parts of Canada, South America as well, and the islands, all right, against their will. And it says slaughtered without mercy, and then their belongings were to be taken. I mean, they were just going to not just kill these people, but take everything they had. So when you think about this in the context of even our own country, you have to think about First Nation people, what we call Indians, and just the genocide that was perpetrated on them by Europeans coming over here. All right, and you're talking about millions of native people whose land was taken, whose lives also were taken. And so these things, they should trouble us. They should cause us to want to think about how do we interact with each other as humans. And so then it says, verse 14 of chapter 3, the contents of the proclamation were to be made public in every province so that everyone would be prepared when that day came. At the king's command, the decree was made public in the capital city of Susa, and the runners carried the news to the provinces. Then listen to this. This is the end of chapter 3, verse 15. The king and Haman sat down and had a drink while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion. What an image. So they're sitting there having, a beer, a glass of wine, whatever, as this news is going out that all of these Jewish people are going to be slaughtered without mercy, women, men, and children. And they're sitting down like it doesn't, like it's nothing, like it doesn't register. It's just like they're so callous. They're sitting down and they're having a drink while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion. And so this is something I want you to think about. We'll sort of hit on this some more next week. But I want you to remember, because some of you are maybe history buffs like me, and you want to connect these dots. But about 130 years ago, there was a sort of a carving out of, or carving up of Africa in Berlin. There was a conference in 1885 called the European leaders met at the infamous Berlin Conference to divide Africa and arbitrarily draw borders that exist to this day. All right, there were 13 European states, representatives of 13 European states, the United States of America, and the Ottoman Empire converged on Berlin at the invitation of German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck to divide up Africa among themselves in accordance with international law. Think about that. Africans were not invited to the meeting. That's in 1885, folks. 1885. They sat down, like in the text we read, Haman and King Xerxes. Wow, well, they weren't dividing up the country. They were committing putting together a plan for extermination. But when you think about this conference in Berlin that happened in 1885 to divide up Africa, I mean, you think about what happened. You sit down, 13 sort of leaders from European nations and the United States and the Ottoman Empire, and you decide to carve up a continent that's not your own. And you do it without even thinking about it. And many of these persons in these countries, and of course, the United States is for a long time has claimed that it's supposed to be a Christian nation. How do you not reconcile that? How do you not deal with that? How do you not go back and repair that? How do you not um, not just ask for forgiveness, but make right? To this day, I've been to Africa several times. Some of the roads that I've traveled when I've been there, particularly in South Sudan, are some of the same roads that the British folks made when they were there and running those places. And I went to the Congo. Um, Leopold uh, was who just ravished that country, taking rubber out of there. Um, so you think about even when you look at this image of in this third chapter in this last verse, that the king's command and decree was made public in the capital city of Susa. Runners carried the news to the provinces. The king and Haman sat down and had a drink while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion. And then 130 years ago, 1885, European leaders met at the Berlin Conference to divide and arbitrarily draw up borders that exist today. February 26, 1885. Representatives of 13 European states, the United States of America, and the Ottoman Empire converged on Berlin. Think about that in terms of this text that we are dealing with. And it's a wonder, you think about wonder why God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. Maybe God is just observing how will humans, how will they deal with these situations that are full of violence, full of hatred. How will they respond? How will they deal with genocide? How will they deal with extermination? How will they deal with the inhumanity that they've sort of exhibit towards each other? That has absolutely nothing to do with me, God, but everything to do with them. How will they make it right? I've put enough inside of humanity. I've created them for them to know, for them to understand. How will they make this right? How will they not just sweep it under the rug, but lay it bare and then make it right? So this text tonight, it makes us really think, here is an atrocity is getting ready to happen on a group of people, and the leaders are sitting down and they're having a drink as if it doesn't really affect them, while the capital city of Susa, is thrown into confusion. Think about the confusion that we experience today amongst our leaders who deny people health care, and they come up with just some outlandish reasons. Think about the confusion that many of the citizens of this country, whatever ethnic group they have, when governors and houses of capital houses come up with oppressive and repressive voting laws that continually repress votes, and then turn around and try to tell people this is helping you. It's like someone who is stealing from you and will then turn around and say, this is really going to help you. How is stealing from me going to help me? How is taking advantage of me going to help me? or help people? How is not providing for people's welfare in terms of health care? How is that hurting you when you have the best health care? When you don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep at. And then you turn around and tell us how hard you worked to get where you are, and you're a politician making, I don't know, 187, 200,000 a year, and you don't even work all the time, but you're working really hard. Think about it. So I want you to think about that tonight as we sort of end this study, because they sat down and they were having a drink. It's like they were oblivious what they had caused. And if we're not careful, we will sit back and allow our leaders to cause confusion, and we'll be thrown into a convulsion, confusion, while they sit back and enjoy life and tell us, the people, that they're supposed to be helping to provide leadership with, tell us that it's, hey, this is okay, while they are sanctioning our death at the same time. So tonight, I want you to think about that in terms of how this story is progressing. Now that this proclamation is out, to have all of the Jews exterminated in the empire, the Persian Empire. Next week we'll talk about what will Esther do. She is Jewish, but she's hiding. And what will Mordecai do? Because he's Jewish as well. He helped to get stuff started. What will he do? What will be their plan? What will be their way of dealing with this proclamation, dealing with this impending evil? All right. So I want to pray. Listen, I thank you all for joining us tonight. I pray that you are following us, and at least send us a note. You can go to our website and at least let us know that you are enjoying. Thanks, Miss Sister. It was Brenda, you're right. I think about confusion going on in Penn Terrace now. Thank you for joining us. You're right. There's some parallels. Sometimes people, they get things started and they leave people out there to handle it, to deal with it. So I want you tonight to think about supporting our church in whatever fashion you desire. But it will be helpful if you would just consider supporting us. And you can go to our website, which is thevillagedc.church. You can give through GiveLify, or you can give through the Cash App. Whatever amount. It could be $5, it could be $10. I want to thank you all for supporting us every week, and all the members of our church. I mean, just so you're so important to us, and I just want to thank you for your giving. Some of you just every week you give on a consistent basis. You tithe, and also you give your time. I also want to thank Miss Perry and Miss Edith for the work that they're doing in Benning Terrace, and I want you to continue to lift us up in prayer as we're working, trying to organize, just around housing, so that they can have good, clean, and safe housing, because they want to stay in D.C. So I pray for that God will give us the strength to organize, that the city will be able to get the right people's attention, whether they're developers and WIN, Washington Interfaith Network, that we'll work towards sort of pulling together the people in the community in a way in which they are empowered to bring about the changes that they want to see. So I ask for you to pray for that. Pray for our nation. Pray for each other. And look, as I close on that, I want to close with a word of prayer. Hopefully I will see some of you on Sunday. God, thank you for this time we spent tonight in study. I pray that something I've shared, something we've gone through, has sort of push something in our minds to think about things that we are experiencing even now. But think about these stories in terms of what was happening to the Hebrew, the Jewish people in Persian Empire, and how perhaps we can learn some lessons that will help us to not only survive in this empire, but find a way in which to make the kind of systemic changes that's necessary so that people, particularly people who are oppressed and marginalized, whose backs are against the wall, can see the light of day. This is my prayer in your son's name. Amen. So have a good evening. Thank you again for joining me. God bless.